Okay, so you guys have really blown us away with all the incredible stuff you've been sending in lately. Like, seriously, you've been sharing so much amazing material all about getting those love relationships right.
Yeah, it's been pretty phenomenal to see the level of engagement we've had on this topic.
Right. And, I think it's clear that so many of us are really craving that deeper understanding of how to make those close bonds work,
Yeah.
how to really build something that lasts.
It's a universal yearning, isn't it?
It really is. So we thought, why not dive deep into some of the most impactful resources you've shared? And for today's deep dive, we're going to be focusing specifically on Sue Johnson's Hold Me Tight.
Excellent choice. That book is a treasure trove of wisdom.
Isn't it? It's packed with actionable insights. And that's what we really want to get at today, the practical stuff, the stuff you can actually use, right now to start making a difference in your own relationships. Think of this as a shortcut to a lifetime of love, all in about 35 minutes. So for those of you who haven't met our expert yet, they've been deeply immersed in these relationship resources for, like, forever, it seems.
Well, I wouldn't say forever, but I've certainly been fascinated by this topic for quite a while.
Modest, too.
Yeah.
So let's start with Sue Johnson. Who is she and why is she so important in this whole world of understanding love and relationships?
Sue Johnson is, well, she's kind of a rock star in the field of couples therapy. Since way back in the early 1980s, she's been working directly with couples, and she's the brilliant mind behind emotionally focused therapy, EFT for short. And what's so powerful about her approach is this real emphasis on helping partners truly understand those deep emotions that are driving each other's behavior. It's not just about changing behaviors, it's about getting to the heart of the matter.
It's like, before you can fix anything, you got to figure out where it's broken,
Yep.
right? And understand why it broke in the first place.
Exactly.
So it's about way more than just like learning communication tricks. It's about going deeper. And this feels especially relevant today, don't you think? I mean, when we look around, it's like everyone's talking about how disconnected we've become.
It's a huge theme in contemporary culture.
Right. Like even Robert Putnam in his book Bowling Alone, he talks about this growing social isolation. And, there was even this big National Science Foundation survey way back in 2006 that was showing how we're just becoming less and less connected as a society.
Which makes those close, intimate relationships all the more precious and important.
Exactly. It's like they're not just a nice to have anymore. They're essential for our well-being. I mean, if we're not finding that sense of belonging and connection in our communities, we're going to be looking for it somewhere, right?
Absolutely. And that puts a lot of pressure on romantic relationships to fulfill needs that were perhaps once met by a broader social network.
Makes total sense. So now, what's really cool is how Sue Johnson's work actually builds upon the work of this fascinating guy, John Bowlby. Can you tell us about him and his big idea, attachment theory?
So Bowlby was a psychiatrist, and he was a real pioneer. His work with children, especially kids who'd been through some rough stuff, emotional difficulties and separation from their parents, he realized that connection was essential for human development. And this idea that we are wired for connection from the very beginning, it really revolutionized how we understand love. Like before Bowlby, a lot of psychology was very focused on the individual's inner world, their thoughts and feelings. But Bowlby was like, no, we've got to look at these external bonds.
It's like we're not just isolated islands, right?
Exactly. We are social creatures, and those bonds we form, those attachments, they shape us in profound ways.
And that's where Mary Ainsworth comes in, right?
Precisely. She was like, okay, we got to find a way to actually see this attachment stuff in action. And she developed this really ingenious experiment called the strange situation. It's pretty simple, but super revealing. They basically observed how babies react when they're separated from their caregivers and then reunited with them. And through this experiment, they were able to identify these key attachment behaviors.
So what are some of those core behaviors?
Well, like wanting to be close to the people you love, reaching out when you're feeling upset or scared, missing them when they're not around, and even being able to go out and explore the world, knowing that you have that secure base to come back to.
Makes sense. Like those behaviors are hardwired into us from the very beginning.
Exactly, and they continue to influence our relationships throughout our lives.
So all of this, Bowlby, Ainsworth, Johnson, it's all pointing to how crucial these bonds are for our overall well-being, right? It's not just about feeling warm and fuzzy. It's about our mental and emotional health.
Absolutely, and the research really backs this up. When we look at the data, the link between the quality of our relationships and our mental health is just undeniable. Like, some studies have shown that people who are struggling in their marriages are 10 times more likely to be depressed.
10 times, it's huge.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And on the flip side, people who have strong, loving connections, they tend to be more resilient, they cope better with stress, and they just report higher levels of overall happiness and well-being.
Makes sense. So healthy relationships are not just a luxury, they're a necessity for a good life.
You could say that again.
Okay, so let's get into the heart of Sue Johnson's book, Hold Me Tight. She talks about these 7 transforming conversations. What are these conversations all about, and what's their big goal?
So the core idea is this. These 7 conversations are all designed to help couples cultivate a very specific kind of emotional responsiveness. And Johnson argues that this type of emotional responsiveness is the key ingredient for a lasting and secure bond.
Okay, so responsiveness, it's not just about reacting, it's about something deeper, right?
Exactly. It's not just about saying, oh, yeah, I hear you, but actually showing your partner that you understand them, that you care about their feelings, and that you're there for them, especially when they're feeling vulnerable or afraid.
So it's like their feelings matter to you.
Absolutely. And she has this really helpful framework, the A.R.E framework, that breaks down the essential elements of emotional responsiveness.
A.R.E, what's that all about?
So it stands for accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement. Accessibility is all about being open and reachable, especially during those moments when your partner's feeling insecure or needs that extra bit of support. You know, putting down your phone when they're trying to talk to you, turning towards them, both physically and emotionally, letting them know that you're there for them.
Got it. Being present, even when it's tough.
Yeah.
And what about responsiveness?
Responsiveness is about, well, responding to your partner's emotions in a way that lets them know you get it. You're not just listening, you're understanding. You're showing them that their feelings have an impact on you.
Okay, so if they're feeling sad, you're not just saying, oh, cheer up. You're actually acknowledging their sadness and letting them know you care.
Exactly. And you're offering comfort when it's needed. What's fascinating is that research shows that this kind of sensitive responsiveness can actually have a calming effect on the nervous system. It helps your partner feel safe and secure.
Wow, that's cool. So just by being emotionally present and responsive, we can actually help our partner regulate their emotions.
That's what the research suggests. And it makes sense, right? When we feel seen and understood, we feel safer. And then there's engagement, which is about...
Hold on, before we get to engagement, I just want to make sure I'm following along here. So we've got accessibility, being open and reachable, responsiveness, really getting where your partner's coming from, and responding in a way that makes them feel safe and understood. And now we're moving on to engagement.
Perfect. You've got it. And engagement is all about that deep sense of knowing that your partner values you, that they're committed to you, and that they want to stay close. It's about feeling that pull towards each other, that magnetic attraction, that desire to be together.
So it's like beyond just being there for each other, it's about actually wanting to be there.
Exactly. It's about being actively involved in the relationship, making an effort to connect, planning quality time together, and just generally showing up for each other in a way that says, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, I like that. Accessibility, responsiveness, engagement. A.R.E, got it. Now, the book also talks about this whole drama of connection and disconnection that unfolds in relationships. Can you unpack that for us a bit?
Yeah, so Johnson uses this metaphor of a dance, where couples are constantly moving closer and then pulling away. And sometimes those moves are smooth and graceful, and other times they're clumsy and awkward.
Like we step on each other's toes.
Sometimes literally, but more often figuratively. And what she's saying is that this back and forth, this ebb and flow of connection and disconnection, it's a natural part of any close relationship.
So it's not like if you're perfectly in sync all the time, then your relationship's perfect.
Not at all. In fact, she argues that those moments of disconnection, they're actually opportunities for growth and deepening the bond.
But sometimes that disconnection can get pretty messy. Like it can turn into something way more negative. And that's where she introduces this idea of demon dialogues.
Oh, yeah, those demon dialogues, they can be real relationship killers. They're like these negative patterns of interaction that couples get stuck in. And once you're in them, it's like this downward spiral that just pulls you further and further apart.
Okay, so can you give us an example of what one of these demon dialogues might look like?
Well, imagine a couple, we'll call them Jay and Sally. They're constantly fighting about money. Every time the topic comes up, it's the same old argument. Jay feels like Sally's being irresponsible. Sally feels like Jay's being controlling. And they just go round and round, blaming each other and getting nowhere.
Oof, I can feel the tension just thinking about that.
Right. Or you might have Jane and Chris, who are always disagreeing about how to raise their kids. Jane thinks Chris is too lenient. Chris thinks Jane is too strict. And they end up undermining each other in front of the kids, creating a really chaotic and unstable environment.
Yeah, those parenting disagreements can be so tricky.
They really can. And then there's Nat and Carrie, who are dealing with the aftermath of an affair. The trust is shattered, and they're both feeling incredibly hurt and betrayed.
Those are some heavy examples. It's like you can almost see those couples getting sucked into these negative cycles.
Exactly. And the more they get stuck in these demon dialogues, the more they start to see each other as the enemy. They lose that sense of being on the same team.
Well, okay, so what's going on beneath the surface here? Like, what's the root cause of these destructive patterns?
Well, Johnson says that it all comes back to that primal fear of disconnection. When we sense that our partner is pulling away, becoming emotionally unavailable or unresponsive, it triggers this deep instinctual panic in us. It's like an alarm bell going off in our brains.
Alarm bell.
Yeah, like a real threat response. And neuroscientists have actually shown that this fear of losing connection, it activates the amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain.
Wow, so it's not just in our heads, it's like a physiological response.
Exactly. It's hardwired into us. And when that alarm bell goes off, we tend to react in one of two ways.
Fight or flight.
Sort of. We either become demanding and clingy, trying desperately to get our partner's attention and pull them closer, or we withdraw and shut down, trying to protect ourselves from further hurt.
So it's like two sides of the same coin. Both reactions are ultimately about trying to manage that fear of disconnection.
Precisely. And what's interesting is that these reactions, they might seem like they're working in the short term, but they actually backfire in the long run.
Because the more we cling or withdraw, the further we push our partner away.
Exactly. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more we try to control the situation, the less safe and secure our partner feels, and the more likely they are to react in a way that reinforces our fears.
So we end up creating the very thing we're most afraid of.
Pretty much. And that's the insidious nature of these demon dialogues. They feed on themselves.
Okay, so if we're all wired for connection, and we all crave that sense of closeness and security, why do we keep getting trapped in these destructive patterns? Like, why can't we just see what's happening and stop it?
Well, there are a few reasons. Sometimes we're just not tuned into our partner's emotional signals. We're distracted, we're stressed, we're busy, and we miss those subtle cues that they're needing connection.
Okay, so we're not always the most attentive partners.
We're all human. And sometimes we struggle to express our own needs clearly. We might not even be fully aware of what we're needing or feeling. Or we might know what we're feeling, but we don't know how to say it in a way that our partner will actually hear.
Yeah, it's like we need to learn how to speak each other's love languages.
That's a great way to put it. And sometimes our attempts to express our needs come out in really unhealthy ways. Like we might criticize our partner, or we might make demands, or we might try to control them.
And that just pushes them further away.
Exactly. Because what they're hearing is not, I need you, but you're not good enough.
Ouch. Yeah, that's not going to make anyone feel loved and secure.
Not at all. And then there's the whole issue of, trying to substitute physical intimacy for real emotional intimacy.
Like thinking that sex will fix everything.
Yeah, sometimes people think that if they can just have that physical connection, then everything else will fall into place. But the reality is that if you're not feeling emotionally connected, sex is often not going to bridge that gap. It might even make things worse.
Because it can feel like another form of pressure or control.
Exactly. So the key is to address those underlying emotional needs first.
Right. Okay, so when these demon dialogues take hold and we get sucked into these negative cycles, it creates this whole atmosphere of distrust and insecurity, right?
Absolutely. It's like this dark cloud that settles over the relationship. And both partners start feeling unsafe, on edge, and constantly on guard.
Like you're walking on eggshells all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not a recipe for a happy and fulfilling relationship.
No, sounds exhausting.
It is. And what's worse is that these patterns, they can become so ingrained that they start to feel automatic.
Like we're not even consciously choosing them anymore.
Exactly. We just react without thinking. And even when we do have those moments of awareness, like, oh, here we go again, it can be so hard to break free.
So it's like we're trapped in a loop.
Pretty much. And it all comes back to that attachment alarm we talked about earlier. Remember, whenever we sense a threat to the connection, whether it's real or imagined, that alarm bell goes off in our brains.
And then we react in those predictable ways. either clinging or withdrawing.
Exactly. And the more we get caught in that loop, the harder it is to break free.
So it sounds like the first step to changing these negative patterns is really about awareness,
Right.
becoming more aware of our own reactions and the ways we might be contributing to the cycle.
Absolutely. Because until we can see what's happening, we can't change it. And this is where Johnson's 7 conversations come in. They're all about helping couples understand their patterns, identify those triggers, and learn how to respond to each other in a way that creates safety and security.
Okay, so let's dive into those conversations then.
Sounds good. Are you ready?
Bring it on. But before we go there, I just want to touch on one more thing. We've talked about the importance of emotional responsiveness.
Yeah.
But is there any, scientific evidence to support this idea?
Absolutely. There's a ton of research that backs up the importance of emotional responsiveness in relationships.
Okay, cool.
Like one landmark study by Ted Houston, he followed hundreds of couples over many years, and guess what he found? He found that the #1 predictor of marital breakdown wasn't the amount of conflict couples had.
It wasn't. I would have thought that was a big one.
Nope. The biggest predictor of divorce was actually a decrease in affection and emotional responsiveness. In other words, it wasn't the fights that were killing the relationships, it was the growing emotional distance.
Wow, that's really interesting.
It is. And on the flip side, couples who were able to maintain that sense of emotional connection, they were much more likely to stay together and have happy and fulfilling relationships.
So basically, the more emotionally responsive we are to our partners, the stronger our bond will be.
That's what the research suggests. And Johnson uses this really cool analogy in the book. She talks about lovers being like 2 people on a tightrope.
2 people on a tightrope.
Yeah, like imagine you and your partner are walking across this high wire and there's this strong wind blowing trying to knock you off balance.
Oh, I don't like heights. This is making me nervous just thinking about it.
Well, try to stay with me here. So the wind represents those doubts and fears that can arise in any relationship. You know, those moments when you start to feel insecure or disconnected. And what Johnson is saying is that when that wind blows, we need to be able to lean on each other for support. We need to be able to reach out and feel our partner's hand there, steady and strong, ready to catch us if we stumble.
Okay, I get it. It's like when we're feeling vulnerable, we need our partner to be there for us, emotionally present and supportive.
Exactly. And if we try to do it alone, if we try to just tough it out, we're more likely to fall.
Makes sense. So it's about being able to lean on each other, to trust that the other person will be there when we need them. And that's what creates that sense of security and balance.
Precisely. And she illustrates this so beautifully with the story of Tim and Sarah in the book. Remember them, they're in couples therapy. And at first, Tim is really resistant. He's defensive, he's blaming Sarah, he's calling her immature.
Yeah, I remember that part. He was not a very sympathetic character at first.
No, not really. But then there's this really powerful turning point where Tim starts to open up. He starts to acknowledge Sarah's hurt, and he even admits to his own vulnerabilities. He talks about his fear of failing, his fear of not being good enough.
And that's when things start to shift.
Exactly, because when Tim drops his defenses and shows his vulnerability, it allows Sarah to soften too. She can see that he's not just being a jerk, he's actually scared and hurting.
So it's like his vulnerability creates a space for her vulnerability.
Precisely. And that's when the real connection starts to happen.
Okay, so it's like vulnerability breeds vulnerability, and that leads to deeper intimacy.
That's a great way to put it.
Awesome. So with all of that in mind, let's dive into those 7 conversations. What are they, and how can they help us create that kind of secure connection in our own relationships?
You bet. Are you ready to get started?
I am. Hit me with it.
Okay, so conversation #1 is all about recognizing the demon dialogues. Remember those nasty patterns we were talking about earlier?
The ones that make you want to run for the hills.
Yeah, those. So the first step is to actually become aware of them, to see them playing out in your own relationship.
Okay, so how do we do that? Like, how do
Yeah.
we spot these demon dialogues in the wild?
Well, Johnson provides some really helpful tools in the book. Like she has these really specific examples of common demon dialogues so you can start to see, oh, wow, that sounds familiar. And she encourages couples to actually map out their arguments, like write down who said what and what the emotional tone was, and then look for the patterns.
Okay, so instead of just getting caught up in the content of the argument, we're stepping back and observing the process, the dance itself.
Exactly. It's like becoming a relationship scientist, objectively observing your data and looking for those recurring themes.
I love that. Relationship scientists, I'm in. Okay, so we've recognized the demon dialogue. What's next?
Well, step 2 is all about finding the raw spots. Remember those vulnerable places we were talking about earlier? The ones that get triggered when we feel disconnected from our partner.
Yeah, those tender spots that make us want to lash out or withdraw.
Exactly. So this conversation is all about identifying those raw spots, both in ourselves and in our partner.
So how do we do that? Like, how do we find these hidden landmines?
Well, it takes some self-reflection, some slowing down, and really paying attention to our own reactions, like noticing what triggers us, what makes us feel defensive or insecure.
Okay, so like, if my partner said something that makes me feel small or unimportant, that might be a clue that there's a raw spot there.
Exactly. And it's not just about identifying the trigger, it's also about understanding where that sensitivity comes from, like what past experiences might be feeding into that reaction.
Right, because sometimes those raw spots, they go way back.
Absolutely. They might be rooted in our childhood or in previous relationships, and until we understand where they're coming from, they're going to keep getting triggered.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've recognized the demon dialogues and we've found the raw spots. What's the next step?
Okay, this one's a big one. It's called revisiting a rocky moment.
Uh-oh, sounds intense.
It can be, but it's also incredibly powerful. So basically, this conversation is about choosing a specific moment of disconnection, a recent fight, or maybe a recurring pattern that keeps coming up and really unpacking it together.
So like, replaying the tape, but this time with more awareness and understanding.
Exactly. And the key here is to slow things down, to really take the time to understand each other's perspective without blame or judgment.
Okay, so no pointing fingers.
Nope, no finger pointing allowed. Instead, you're trying to see things from your partner's point of view to understand what triggered them, what they were feeling, and what they needed in that moment.
So it's like empathy in action.
Exactly. And it's not always easy, but it's so important because when we can truly understand our partner's experience, it changes everything.
It's like we're building a bridge of understanding. Okay, so we've revisited a rocky moment. What's next?
The next conversation is all about engaging your partner's attachment needs.
Okay, so this is where we actually start putting all of that awareness and understanding into practice, right?
Precisely. So once you've identified those raw spots, those vulnerable places, you can start to respond to your partner in a way that actually meets their needs.
Okay, so can you give us an example of what that might look like?
Sure. Let's say your partner's raw spot is feeling unimportant or overlooked. Maybe they grew up feeling like their needs didn't matter, or maybe they've been in past relationships where they felt taken for granted.
Yeah, those are definitely common raw spots.
So when you notice that they're feeling that way again, instead of getting defensive or dismissive, you can actively try to reassure them. You can tell them how much they mean to you. You can express your appreciation for them. You can show them through your actions that you value their presence in your life.
Yeah, so it's about actively meeting those needs instead of just assuming that they know how we feel.
Exactly. Because sometimes people need to hear it, they need to see it, they need to feel it, and that's what creates that sense of safety and security.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're engaging our partner's attachment needs. What's the next conversation about?
This one's called Holding Me Tight, and it's all about creating those moments of deep connection and intimacy.
Ooh, sounds romantic.
It is. So Johnson talks about these hold me tight moments as being those times when one partner reaches out for connection and the other partner responds in a way that makes them feel safe, seen, and understood. And she says that these moments, they're like little miracles. They have the power to heal old wounds, to build trust, and to deepen the bond in a really profound way.
Wow, so it's like these tiny moments can actually have a huge impact on the relationship.
Exactly. They're like these little deposits in the emotional bank account.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And she encourages couples to create these moments intentionally, like
Okay.
taking a few minutes each day to just connect, to talk about how you're feeling, to listen to each other without distractions, to offer comfort and support when it's needed.
Sounds simple enough, but I bet it's not always easy to do consistently.
You're right. It takes effort and intentionality,
Yeah.
but the rewards are so worth it.
Okay, so we're holding each other tight. We're creating those moments of deep connection. What's next?
The next conversation is all about forgiving injuries. And this one can be really tough.
Yeah, forgiveness is not always easy.
No, it's not. But it's essential for healing.
Mm.
Because when we hold on to hurt and resentment, it poisons the relationship.
It's like carrying around a heavy weight.
Exactly. And Johnson talks about how forgiveness isn't just about saying, I forgive you. It's a much deeper process. It involves really understanding the other person's perspective, seeing how their actions might have been influenced by their own past hurts and vulnerabilities.
So it's like empathy on steroids.
You could say that. And it also involves taking responsibility for our own part in the conflict. Because even when we're the ones who've been hurt, there's always something we can learn about ourselves and how we might have contributed to the situation.
Right? Because it's never just one person's fault. It takes two to tango.
Exactly. And when both partners can take ownership of their part and they can truly understand each other's experience, that's when true forgiveness can happen. And that's when the healing can begin.
Okay, so we're forgiving injuries, we're letting go of that heavy baggage. What's the final conversation about?
The final conversation is called Bonding Through Sex and Touch. And this is where we explore the physical side of intimacy.
Okay, so we're finally getting to the good stuff.
Well, Johnson argues that all of the previous conversations, all of that work on emotional connection and responsiveness, it actually lays the foundation for a more fulfilling and satisfying sex life.
Interesting. So it's like emotional intimacy breeds physical intimacy.
Exactly. And she talks about how sex can be this incredible way to deepen the bond, to express love and affection, and to just enjoy each other's bodies. But she also acknowledges that sex can be really complicated.
Understatement of the year.
Right. There are so many factors that can influence our sexual desire and our ability to enjoy sex, like stress, fatigue, body image issues, past experiences, communication problems. All of that can play a role.
Yeah, it's not always as simple as just flipping a switch.
No, it's not. And that's why it's so important to be able to talk openly and honestly with your partner about sex, to be able to share your desires, your fears, your needs, and to listen to each other with compassion and understanding.
So communication is key, just like in every other area of the relationship.
Exactly. And Johnson also talks about the importance of non-sexual touch, like cuddling, holding hands, massage. All of that can be incredibly bonding and can help create a sense of safety and intimacy that can then translate into a more fulfilling sexual experience.
Okay, so it's not just about sex itself, it's about creating a culture of affection and touch in the relationship.
Exactly. And that can make a world of difference.
Awesome. So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've talked about the importance of emotional responsiveness, those nasty demon dialogues, finding our raw spots, and the power of forgiveness and intimacy. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap things up?
Well, just that these 7 conversations, they're not just a one-time thing, They're ongoing practices. It's about continually showing up for each other, being curious about each other's experience, and making the effort to stay connected, even when it's hard.
Yeah, so it's like a lifelong journey of learning and growing together.
Exactly.
That's beautiful. Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. And remember, lasting love, it's not just something that happens to you. It's something you create through intentional action and conscious effort.
Well said.
And for all of you listening, what's one small step you can take today, right now, to start putting these ideas into practice? What's one tiny action that can make a big difference in your relationship? Think about it. Until next time.